Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's live at 8 o'clock. I'll give people a few minutes to come and join us to see how many we get coming in. So if you're here, give me a wave. Let's say hello in the comments below. That would be really, really wonderful if you could let me know that you're here and you're watching live with me tonight. So I'll give people a couple of moments to do that. And we'll see who comes and joins us. If not, it's in the Facebook group. It'll go on the YouTube channel and you'd be able to catch up with it at a later date. If you're watching the replay, still say hello below and let me know you're here and share your thoughts as we go through. Tonight is the continuation of the series I started in late July, early August. You may recall, for those of you who've been part of the group since then, I was talking around safeguarding audits and reviews, and also talking about then what you need to put in your safeguarding policies and your safeguarding procedures. We took a bit of a break over August while people were figuring things out, and we ran the focus week, and now we are back to complete that series of live trainings around what we need to be completing in our safeguarding audits. So I appreciate that for many of you, you will probably be fed up to the back teeth about safeguarding audits and risk assessments. You've probably done umpteen of them by now. They are, however, still a really, really important part of the work that you do in your organisation, whether that's a school, a college, FE, university, whether you're part of a multi-academy trust, whether you are a dance school, a karate club, a sports club, not that they aren't sports, but a whole host of things. Your risk assessments are really, really important. And they are important because in the current climate, they will help you understand your weaknesses in terms of your business, your classroom settings, your corridor, your open spaces. They can really help you to use a legal phrase, mitigate your the issues that you are going to face. We are currently we thought we were coming to the end of a global pandemic. We are still very much in the midst of it. And as it stands tonight, which is the 21st of September, 2020, it looks like there are going to be even greater lockdowns happen over the coming weeks. We're waiting for an announcement tomorrow from the Prime Minister. Tonight, I want to look at why your risk assessments are so important to help you keep teaching, keep sharing, and to keep your business running. So risk assessments are one of those things that can be really, really cumbersome, can feel like you do absolutely all of the time. And they can also be something that you can be really, really tempted to shortcut if you do a lot of the same thing over and over and over again. It can be really, really tempting to just cut and paste your assessments from one document to the next. Please, for all that is good in the world, do not do that. You will put yourself in an enormously difficult situation. And the reason for that is this. Your risk assessments form a huge part of your ability to manage what is happening in your organisation. It is a way to control the dangers, the risks that can happen during school activities, sports activities, outings, those kind of things. They are an absolute must under health and safety legislation. They have to be done, they have to be stored correctly, and you have to make sure that they suit what is going on. They are absolutely essential for your ability to comply with health and safety legislation. So why is that important? Well, it's important because if you do not comply with health and safety legislation, the reality is the person responsible, potentially somebody in the senior leadership team, if not your head teacher or your CEO or whomever, managing director, whoever, could potentially go to prison. And also your organisation can face an enormous fine, as well as potentially being sued by the family for whose child this issue has arisen. So the potential implications are absolutely enormous here. I'm not saying that to terrify anybody. Lord knows it's crazy enough out there at the moment, but it's something you have to be aware of. So with that in mind, knowing that they're an absolute must, and also thinking about what is going on at the moment, the risk assessments that you do, personally, I don't think you can take off the shelf at all. And if you disagree with anything I'm saying, please pop it in the comments below. Let me know what you're thinking. Let me know how things are going for you, where you are and what in your organisation. So let me know in the comments below. So in terms of your risk assessment, what does it need to have in it? Well, according to Health and Safety Executive, there are 5 things you need to be considering, and I'm going to read them off my phone. So the Health and Safety Executive suggests you do these 5 steps. So number 1, you identify the hazards. Number 2, you decide who might be harmed and how, important. You then have to evaluate the risks and decide on precautions. That's number 3. 4, you then need to record your findings and implement them. And then number 5, you need to review your assessment as and when, and update if necessary. So I think number 1 might be relatively self-explanatory. So what are the hazards? These could be anything. At the moment, global pandemic, we're talking about the risk of coronavirus. We're talking about the risk of spreading it. But it could be that you are talking about going on a school activity where there is lots of physical activity. There could be a potential injury. You could have it so that there is a decorator coming into the school or into your office space, and so there are students milling about around the place. So how do you mitigate that? So that could be the hazard. Painter, paint, ladders, there's your hazard, to keep it relatively simple. So then you have to decide who could be harmed by this. So that's the first part. That there's 2 parts to that second bit: who could be harmed and how. So that first element, who could be harmed, if we think about the decorator on his ladder that turns up in the middle of the day and wants to do work in a particular place which has got lots and lots of traffic for students and for staff. So the people who may be harmed there are students and staff. Relatively straightforward and simple. Then you need to decide, how might they be harmed? So what could be the harm that befalls them? Well, again, let's use this example. It could be that the decorator is up his ladder, the ladder slips, takes out a load of students. Could be that they inhale toxic paint fumes. You should never be using toxic stuff, but maybe that hasn't been checked in terms of what material the decorator is using. Maybe they are up a ladder and they drop the paint can. Maybe there's something else gets dropped. So you've got to think about the how. That gets more complicated depending on the activity that's being undertaken. So you need to think about, in terms of the how, that could change. So for example, if you have an activity where students are regularly going into town, you might have a situation where every week you've got traffic issues, so this is how you mitigate them, or you have other issues, so this is what you do in those circumstances. And relatively speaking, it rarely changes. However, if we think about the current climate again, and thinking about some of the particular hotspot areas in this country, you might have a regular trip into town for those students, and we'll put coronavirus to one side for the moment, but you may have a situation whereby there is a massive political protest taking place. So you would need to factor that into your risk assessment, because the how the students may be harmed is not by traffic necessarily on the main road, but it could be as a result of seeing this protest. It could be as being caught up in it. Maybe you have to take diversions. If you've got students with who are neurodiverse, maybe they will need additional support in order to do a different route or to take a different route. So you see, you've really got to think about the how and make sure that's very specific to the circumstances that you are assessing. And what we've just done there is you then have to evaluate them. So is it really a risk? Is it not a risk? Is it being overly cautious? Is it being, are there other ways that you can mitigate that? So actually, if they didn't go into town on a Wednesday, but they went to town on a Thursday, you don't have that particular issue. Or is it happening all week? There are lots of things that you can think about to weigh up. When we talk about evaluating something, you're weighing up the pros and cons, you're weighing up the different risks that there are for these young people, and making sure that you are happy with the conclusion that you come to. Now, it may well be that as part of that risk assessment, and I know lots of you are doing that in terms of what's currently happening, sometimes the risk is just too great, that sometimes you may want to have a certain thing happen, but it's just too great a risk given everything else that is going on. So once you've evaluated it and you then have to decide, what are my precautions? Because if you can't put any precautions in place, you may well be saying this isn't happening. Really, really important is that whatever your decision, you have recorded the reasoning behind it. It doesn't matter whether you agree that it's going to happen and these are the precautions, or you say it doesn't matter because of the precautions, this isn't happening. Make a thorough written note of why you and how you have come to that conclusion, and make sure that is kept somewhere that is accessible by those who need to know it and need to have access to it. But it is really, really important that these assessments are done and that they are recorded. They are written down. And finally, and a huge issue that is occurring right now, is that a risk assessment isn't done once and then finished. Your risk assessment has to be reassessed. There will be a change in circumstance. There will be a change in things that are happening. There may be a change in staff. There may be a change in students that you need to factor in terms of risk assessments that you've done previously. And that's essentially where we are right now with what's happening in organisations up and down the country, probably around the world in fairness, in relation to the current pandemic. There are Lots of schools and organisations now having to implement the precautions that they put in place several weeks ago in order to allow them to reopen. There are others who are having to reevaluate because of the rule of 6. There are others who are now having to double check that the processes and procedures that they put in place as part of their precautionary measures as a result of their risk assessment, that they actually work and they operate, and that they make sure that if there's anything that needs to be changed, that they do so and update that risk assessment, because that is absolutely something that Ofsted is going to be looking at. But bigger than Ofsted is if something happens in your organisation and you haven't updated your risk assessment, or you haven't completed a risk assessment for that particular activity, and there is a serious injury, heaven forbid there is a death, the health and safety executive will want to know what you have done. This takes us away from the realms of what we like to think about within education and puts us squarely with the rest of the workforce up and down the country. So it is something that can feel really cumbersome, and I know lots of you have been doing risk assessments for a long time, and lots of you are probably fed up to the back teeth of risk assessments at the moment, but they are really important and they are utterly necessary right now, and they must be updated, they must be kept securely, and they must be reviewed on a regular basis. Thank you very much for being part of tonight's live training. If you've got any questions in relation to risk assessment, then pop them in the questions below. Use the hashtag #AskKate, and I will do my best to answer them either this evening or probably tomorrow. If anybody's got any questions now, pop them in the comment box. And I will just give you a moment to see if anybody wants to pop a question in or a thought in. No? Okay. Just checking. Sometimes it doesn't always come up on this, but it does come up on my phone for some reason. I've no idea why. No idea why that happens. But every now and again that happens. Okay. So if nobody's got any questions at the moment, thank you so much for being with me live. Thank you very much for taking your time out of this evening. And I will see you same time next week, live in here, where we will be talking about next week. We're going to be talking about training needs, and not just in relation to designated safeguarding needs. We're going to think a bit wider. So Victoria, do you have any specific advice for school governors? Well, school governors are going to have to make sure that they're working with the senior leadership team and that they are comfortable that the plans that have been put in place are robust enough, and that they're going to stand up to scrutiny. So governors will ultimately hold the responsibility. So they will need to be satisfied that big risk assessments, particularly thinking around COVID, are sufficiently robust and have been well thought through. I know lots of organisations are actually, one of the big bits of advice I was things I was suggesting over the summer was that your senior leadership team absolutely work with your governors to make sure that you have got a coherent plan, to make sure that they are satisfied, everybody is satisfied that the necessary steps have been taken and that everybody understands the plan and the process, because ultimately Ofsted will be asking governors what they thought and whether or not they were involved in it. So it's definitely something to make sure that your governors are on board with. If governors are concerned that they have not been included, then chair of governors can absolutely speak to the head or the senior leadership team and say, I want to know what's happening. I want to be included, and I want to be satisfied that what you have done and what you are doing is appropriate for this particular school in this particular setting. So that would be my suggestion, is make sure that they feel that they've been either included or that they are satisfied with the assessments that have been done for big things. And for the others, that they are satisfied that the hierarchy in place is sufficiently robust to make sure that the assessments are being done at a lower level. Because governors will not want to be involved in every risk assessment that gets done within a particular organisation. Same as trustees won't really want to be involved in every assessment that a charity will complete, but they will need to be satisfied that those who are doing those assessments, or those who have responsibility for those assessments, are able to do them robustly, or if they're not the ones conducting them, that their staff will do so robustly, and they won't just sign things off blindly. They will make sure that they are checked and they are thorough, so you've got that line of accountability going through. But if governors aren't happy, then it's well within their gift to say they're not happy, and that they want more information, because ultimately, from a chair of governors perspective, they could go to prison because of those sorts of mistakes and errors, and nobody wants to be taking that lightly at all. That was a very long-winded answer, Victoria. I hope that has helped for you. Anybody else has got any other questions? Otherwise, I will call time on tonight's session. If you're watching the replay and you do have questions or thoughts or want to share what's happening for you, then use the comments below. And if you've got a question, then I would put a Q at the beginning, and let me know, and use the hashtag #AskKate as well, and then I will pick it up. I agree, Victoria. It is really, really challenging to balance those two roles in terms of daily operational practice, and then what has to happen with governance as well. Yeah, it can be pretty it can be pretty tricky, but that's the sort of thing that I do work with members with, in terms of just helping them work out where their line is and what they need to be doing. So if it's something you're struggling with, Victoria, and you want to talk to me more about how I can help you a bit more, then let me know. But I accept it is really challenging to try and navigate that. But thank you very much for your question. Okay, I'm going to call time tonight. Thank you so much for your involvement and for your engagement. If you do have questions, put your question in, and then use the hashtag #AskKate as well. And I will pick that up afterwards. Okay, see you later, folks.